Hello everybody and welcome to my presentation. I'm going to be talking to you about nurturing positive emotions in an online and on-demand class. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the effect of positive emotions on learning. It's a relatively new field. There's been a lot of research done on the negative emotions that come up and can inhibit learning, but the nurturing of positive emotions and the effect of that is relatively new. Um, Emotions do affect things such as memory, attention, and decision making, and these are all very important things in learning in the classroom. When students feel emotionally positive about a task, it can serve to focus their attention on learning, promote their motivation to learn, and facilitate use of deep learning strategies and self regulation of learning. Active support of emotions in the classroom can lead to academic success, and positive emotions in the classroom can be the catalyst for engagement in learning and eager participation in classroom activities. Students who experience positive emotions make more connections, create more inclusive categories, and have heightened levels of creativity. Um, so you can see that it's definitely worth trying to encourage positive emotions in the classroom. Um, if you do a Google search about encouraging positive emotions in the classroom, which is um, probably what most classroom teachers would have time to do, um, some of the typical suggestions include arriving to class early and staying late and chatting with your students, interact more and lecture less, emphasize active learning, reward student comments and questions with verbal praise, be enthusiastic about teaching and passionate about your subject matter, lighten up, crack a joke now and then, make eye contact with each student, and when all else fails, smile a lot, which will show that you like your students and your job. So all of those would probably work wonders in a classroom situation. But the question is, can this be done online? Are there online equivalents for these strategies, and how could you encourage the same effect in an on-demand class? So if you arrive to class early and stay late, you're showing that you're dedicated and you like your students and you want to chat with them even outside of class time. How can you show that you're that dedicated in an on-demand environment? Um, Interact more and lecture less and emphasize active learning. So how can you be sure that the students are actively learning and they're not just listening to the PowerPoint and then turning off their computer? Um, reward student comments with reward student comments and questions with verbal praise. So how do you make students feel good about their contributions when you're not there in an on-demand class and you're not actually going to see the students? Be enthusiastic about teaching and passionate about your subject matter. So you would normally show that through the way that you teach and your facial expressions and the expression in your voice. How do you show that when you're not actually there? Lighten up and crack a joke now and then. Do jokes translate to an online environment? Make eye contact with each student. So showing that you care about each student and you're connecting individually with each student. But how do you do that when it's an on-demand environment? And when all else fails, smile a lot, and students will think that you like them and your job. How do you show that kind of warm and kind feeling on the internet when you don't see your students? So these are all questions that I would like you to think about. Because this is a recorded workshop, you can think about it as the presentation goes on, or you can think about it afterwards. But the question is, what are the online equivalents, if there are any, of these suggestions for nurturing positive emotions in your class? So, a preliminary kind of solution that I came up with was first to ascertain what emotional support my students wanted in the class. And I did this through monitoring their group discussions about the class. I asked them a whole lot of questions about the class, and then I just asked them to discuss. And I picked out the parts where they were talking about emotions. So the things that came up a lot were, first of all, mitigation of anxiety about technology. So they they wanted to be reassured because they were nervous about participating in a class where they would be using technology the entire time, and a lot of the time they would be using technology that they were not familiar with. Um, they wanted to be able to be casual with the other students and not always work directed. So, if you think about it, being in a real classroom is a very social experience. Um, and when they're working in a group in the class, or even before and after the class, they get to casually talk to each other. So, they wanted to be able to do that even when it was an on demand class. Um, some students wanted to see each other's faces, and others didn't want to see each other's faces. There was about a 50-50 split there. They wanted to have some understanding of each other's emotions. So a lot of students said that when they were using chats, for example, they couldn't see each other's face, and they didn't know if somebody was serious or if they were making a joke, or they didn't know how they felt about the comments that they were making. So they wanted to be able to understand each other's emotions somehow. Um, they wanted to feel like they were a part of something. They wanted to feel a part of a class, even though the class was on demand. And they wanted real time communication to mitigate loneliness. And they wanted to feel informed about their progress. So, um, with all of those things in mind, I designed on demand classes that attempted to cater to the students' emotional needs as well as their academic needs. So, here are some of the things that I did. So, at our university, we use Moodle, and one of the things you can do on Moodle is create a chat for the students to use. So, a chat is where they just type to each other, and they can't actually see each other, but it's in real time. So I put the students in groups of 4, and they were in a different group each week, or sometimes every 2 weeks. And there was always a part of the PowerPoint that was dedicated to chats, usually the part where they're talking about discussion questions, or there's an activity that lends itself to group work, or sometimes they're checking their answers to things. So they would type to each other in these chats. We also had asynchronous forums. So for the forums, sometimes they were written, sometimes they were required to make an audio or a video post. And they were always required to read the other students' posts and then reply to at least 2 of them. So this, I did this for a few reasons. One was so that they could see each other's faces when they made the video posts, and they could kind of understand each other's emotions a little bit better, especially when they were making the video replies to the posts. And another reason that I did these was because I thought that it would help them to feel like they were a part of a class because they get to read everybody else's posts or listen to or watch everybody else's posts. So they get to know the other students and they can see them in the video posts as well. We also had a question and answer forum. So this was designed to try to mitigate some of the students' concerns about technology and also just sort of concerns about the class in general. So this was at the top of the Moodle page for the whole semester. And when the students had a question, they could post their question there. And everybody was automatically subscribed to it. So whenever someone posts a question, everybody gets an email. And they can read the question and they can read my answer to the question. So this way, a lot of students asked questions about using the technology. And this way, the students could first of all realize that they weren't the only ones who were experiencing problems getting used to the technology. So it made them feel less alone in that respect, I think, or at least that's what it was designed for. And also, it's a bit less work for me, sort of having to field lots of emails about the same thing, because this way, one student asks the question and I answer it, and then that's that. So a lot of students asked questions about technology in the beginning, and then as the semester went on, they started asking a lot more questions just about assessments and that sort of thing. The next thing, this seems really simple, but I was very, very, very careful with my PowerPoints to make sure that absolutely everything was perfectly explained, or as close to perfect as I could get. And I preempted the students' questions or problems. So if this happens, do that. If that happens, do this. And I think this helped the students to understand the learning materials and to understand the instructions. The students did say that they missed hearing the teacher's voice. So in the end, I started making a recording of the presentation as well. But I think the students actually understood everything better when they could read everything slowly at their own pace and it was all there. I also tried to be really flexible to show that I understand that the students are participating in a really different way from usual, and so that they might have problems, they might misunderstand a due date or something. So I just told the students that if they couldn't finish something on time, just let me know and I would work with them. And I would always say, when do you think you can submit it? And they would tell me a time, and I'd say, okay, great, submit it then. And I actually never had a student who said that they would submit something on a particular day and then didn't do it. So 100% of students submitted everything when they said they were going to. Also, they later in the semester, the next semester actually, we had a Zoom, not a Zoom class, but the students had Zoom groups, which I'll talk a bit more about later. And I know that they probably were speaking a lot of Japanese in those groups because I wasn't there with them. They were leading it themselves. But the point was more just so that they could feel like part of a group and they could be casual and talk to their friends and get to know each other. So, I mean, if they were speaking Japanese, it's okay. The point wasn't really to speak English. It was more to kind of support their emotional needs. So the results of all of this were that in general the students were happy to use the chats. They did have some issues with time lag and not being able to type fast enough, but they were generally happy to be able to talk in real time to their classmates. About half of them wanted to see each other's faces and the other half didn't. So I ended up with a system where one week they would have a chat, and then the following week they would have a student-led Zoom discussion. So I just put them in a group and put a place on Moodle for them to post a link to their meeting, and they would have a leader of the group each week, each time, who would set up the meeting and then post the passcode for the meeting. So that was entirely student led, and they were able to see each other's faces and just kind of chat casually with each other the way that they would in a real classroom, and also without the teacher being there. The majority of students also said that the forums and chats helped them to feel like they were part of a class, which was great. Many students were worried about using the technology at the start of the semester, but most of them said that the clear instructions and also the question and answer forum helped them to get used to it quickly. Most of them mentioned that they appreciated the flexibility as well. So usually in a face-to-face class, they would have 90 minutes to complete almost everything, and then they'd have some homework to complete before the next class. But this way, the only thing they had to do during the class time was participate in their chat or their Zoom meeting, which they were quite short. They were 20 or 30 minutes, and then the rest of the stuff they had a whole week to finish it all. The general feeling as well was that they missed the face-to-face classes, unfortunately, but they were happy with the on-demand alternative. So with this research, I was focusing on how to encourage and support positive emotions in an on-demand class. But an interesting side note is that on average, the student grades were actually higher for all of my classes during the on-demand semester. I'm not sure how much of that is attributable to the emotional support that I gave them or that I tried to give them, but the grades were higher for that semester. So I thought that was an interesting result because I was expecting the grades to be lower. Okay, so a question that I want you to leave you with is just what can you do? So I know that a lot of us have gone back to face-to-face classes now, but whether the class is face-to-face or online, students do benefit from a teacher who encourages positive emotions in the classroom. So my question for you is, how can you encourage positive emotions in your class? Okay, thank you very much, and I hope I've given you something to think about, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Bye.